Good afternoon. Welcome to Monday. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Welcome to today's session of Business as Usual. I'm joined here with Jonathan Kirsting, who is Vice President of Visibility and All Things Media at the Tech Council. So thank you for being here. A couple of things about the call is that it would not be possible without Huntington Bank, who stepped up to sponsor the entire series. And if you don't know them, they are actually the largest SBA lender here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. They're very active in our tech community. I also want to give a shout out to AT&T, who's also been very, very active in making sure that there's access. They've contributed to the shortage of food, and they've been very active in making sure people have connectivity. Just as a quick programming note, tomorrow, we have a small business owner named Samson McHugh from Waxing Cycles joining us to talk about the cycling phenomena that's spreading across the country as people continue to look to get active. We will be joined in the program by Karen Glodfelty. She's from the Allegheny County Parks Foundation to talk about our organization's efforts to make the region a great place to live, to play, and just to enjoy our lives. And Thursday, we're joined by Superintendent Anthony Hamlet from the Pittsburgh Public Schools and Presley Gillespie, President of Neighborhood Allies, to provide an update on Beyond the Laptops, which is an initiative we partnered with them to address the digital divide. So let's get into our show. I'm thrilled to have Majestic Lane with us. You've noticed I've muted all of you, and that's just to make sure that we're keeping any of the noise down. And also, we want this to be interactive, so we're here to have an opportunity to have a dialogue, we hope, with Majestic. I say we hope because there's lots of questions and lots of things to talk about with him. And this is not an opportunity for you to advertise. So let's just take it from the top now. So I'd like to welcome Majestic Lane. If you don't know him, just a few things about him. He's Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief Equity Officer for the city, works directly for Mayor Peduto. As the Chief Equity Officer and Chief of Staff, he leads the Peduto administration's focus on opportunities for all residents in the city of Pittsburgh concerning education, workforce, safe and healthy communities, digital inclusion. He does a lot. He has a deep background, and you probably won't meet many people that have his kind of experience in terms of community engagement, advocacy, and just getting stuff done. So I'm thrilled to have Majestic here. He actually has attended the University of Pittsburgh, and he lives in North Point Breeze. So welcome, good afternoon, thank you. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that
Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So you have been a leader, I mentioned a moment ago, you've been a leader in community engagement, social entrepreneurship, and advocacy for the entire Pittsburgh community for many years. You know, your focus on empowerment, from my view, has been very, distinct and very steady. So talk a bit about your background, talk a bit about your journey so we can set up this conversation and people really know the Majestic that many people do know.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Originally from Philadelphia, QN, West Philadelphia, born and raised. Came to Pittsburgh in 1994 to attend the University of Pittsburgh, fell in love with the city and never left. And so, just have been here really, my process has really been thinking about how do you create opportunities for all to flourish. As we see in the landscape right now, there's just a lot of conversation and a lot of lack of clarity about, the cycles and the ecosystems that perpetuate inequity. And I've always been interested in that. And I was really interested in the beginning, started from an entrepreneurship perspective. I taught entrepreneurship for some time to youth entrepreneurship through the National Foundation for Teaching Entrepreneurship, which was here. Pittsburgh was a flagship for some time. And from that, kind of went from teaching that entrepreneurship so that young people could start their own businesses and kind of empower themselves to go along with their educational pursuits, to then working kind of deeper in communities with young people who found themselves that didn't have opportunities and first started with entrepreneurship and then kind of started with other things that I thought was interesting with them. Did that for some years, all in the community, ranging from building kind of music studios in Homewood, doing midnight basketball tournaments, whatever we could do to try to kind of access and engage young people. And then I then saw for me what was a process of I'm doing a lot of stuff individually, but there are collective systems that are impacting young people in ways that are stronger than my individual action. And so as part of that, I went to work for, State Senator Jim Furlow, and worked for State Senator Furlow for some time. And just really there kind of blended those ideas of community engagement, but using the levers of government to be able to try to improve people's lives. So that was really where I was able to get that level of experience to really see how that made sense. Then after the senator was gerrymandered, went into a couple different nonprofits, again, working on subjects and issues that were near and dear to my heart, ranging from education, worked at A+ schools, and then also with PCRG, Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group, around, again, these kind of big level ideas. And that was before 4 years ago, going to work for the mayor in his office as, the deputy chief of neighborhood empowerment at that time. And then in successive roles until now with deputy chief of staff and chief equity officer. So.
Yeah, that's quite extensive. And you come from Philly and you fell in love with Pittsburgh, which is
like that. Very
always
cool.
like an adopted city. So it's really
Yes,
smaller here. What was it for you?
I think it's some of the things I like about the city to this day. While Philadelphia still has the bonds of a small town, small city, so to speak. But Pittsburgh is like you really can come and pardon the pun, get stuff done, right? You can really get in, meet people, build connections, build relationships. Now, this in the same way that's good, that's also, it can be bad because you can build relationships easily or you can be locked out of relationships easily, just depending on the situation. So I think it's nimble in that sense. And I think that's why often when you see challenges happen in Pittsburgh, we're able to respond faster because literally the networks and the relationships are so close that you can get things done in a much faster way than you can in other cities. But again, also that lends itself to how are we creating opportunity that are not just based on who you know, they're not just based on the networks you're in, but that are present for everyone to flourish.
It's a lot. It's great. And, I think we owe a lot to the work that you've done over the last few years. But what is the same and different given the past few weeks for you professionally, and if you want to talk about personally?
Well, I think it's good to start personally. I focus a lot on the institutional. I focus a lot on, like I said, the ecosystems and the structures. That's because those things perpetuate themselves often without people being able to really grasp why things are the way they are. But it does start with a very personal relationship. So as a Black man, personally over the last 2 weeks, it's really brought this idea to bear that while I've spent my life working towards the betterment of all people and the betterment of young people and the African American community and other communities, equity is one thing you can have a conversation with, but when people fundamentally don't feel safe, then the equity conversation is secondary, right? So if I'm talking about digital inclusion, if I'm talking about opportunities for jobs and loans, these are all the things that are here to elevate people and create opportunity. But if fundamentally someone worries about if they will survive an encounter with the police, and if communities all across America, people are in doubt if they will survive an encounter, that is a deeply personal thing. And that's a deeply personal thing that I think has been brought to bear, and millions across the world now are seeing that fundamental challenge that people have lived with for hundreds of years. So I think that the shift that has happened has been not that these things haven't happened, not that we haven't seen them on tape prior, but I think there's just a replaying of the same thing. And even with all the words and all the op-eds and the best of intentions, we're still seeing those systems play themselves out. And I think across the world, people really are saying kind of enough and being moved and shifted in a way that has not happened I would argue probably since 1968. So, over 50 years.
Wow. Wow. So there is a question, Jonathan. Let's just ask Majestic the question that's being asked.
Thanks, Majestic, for being here today. We really do appreciate your time. Got a question here. What do you see as the key levers and opportunities to create sustainable and functional systems change?
Well, I think one, it has to be top down and bottom up. So in a sense that it has to be something that people in systems are dedicated to changing the system, not changing the activity. Meaning that no doubt you will see over the next couple weeks and months, a whole host of companies virtue signaling, talking about new programs they're going to create. But the question starts to be, if it does not fundamentally shift the access and opportunity that people have, then it is a short-term solution to a long-term challenge. So that's why I said that you have to really frame it and say, here's the big picture, and we're going to change systems, even when it's uncomfortable to change systems. And then we're going to kind of feed the downstream challenges. So for example, if we're using tech, there's one thing to say, okay, have more Black leaders, have more brown leaders, have more folks with different levels of ability, engaging folks from immigrant communities that maybe traditionally aren't found in tech. But also then we have to go downstream a bit and say, what opportunities are in schools to create this? What opportunities are in communities to actually foster the same access to engaging with tech, to make it as normal as it is for other populations? What are those networks that you can engage, that you go to college and meet somebody and you work on a project, next thing you know, you're an equity investor and you've made millions of dollars, right? Again, those are systems, because those systems, the networks, were the ones that allow people to benefit in that way. But now let's use an example and say, well, let's say I don't know those people, right? Then I don't even have access to the possibilities of fostering and creating, becoming an equity investor in something that could really grow. So I think really it's using the levers of systems change and then feeding the downstream opportunities. And also I think it's important to say, doing this over time. Like, this is a 20 to 30 year reality to shift. This doesn't happen in 5 years, right? Because the challenges didn't occur in 5 years or 10 years, but a lot of our time frames and our attention spans tend to be really short. But I would argue that if you want to shift what we've seen with COVID and what we've seen with racism are two systems that all elevate from the same thing, right? They all come from the same basic fundamental element of, like I said, the systems that frame people's lives are unfair, often from the very beginning. We read a lot in our work about maternal mortality in Pittsburgh and how it's basically, similar to a third world country. Now, there's been multiple times of having this conversation about it, yet the systems themselves haven't been able to make the shift because they haven't met the top-down systems approach with the bottom-up reality of how you make that change sustainable.
Well, I do appreciate that perspective, and I'm going to embrace the sort of sandwich approach to solving really hard problems. I like what I've seen over these last few weeks, and I like the kind of attention that we've gotten despite a pandemic. That I'm surprised, and there are many things that I'm pleased about, many things that I'm not, of course. But in the tech community, Patrick Coletti has asked a question, and he's actually on our board and really deeply cares about what we need to do. Your hat, if no one's noticed, his hat says GSD, get stuff done. But really, get shit done is essentially the way I interpret it. And that is something that I try to practice, right? So when you talk about 5 years, 10 years, et cetera, I don't want to lose a generation. I don't want to lose the opportunity and the attention that we have right now. What are the 3 things? That's what Patrick Coletti is asking. What are the 3 things that we can do as a tech community? What are there things in your head that you think that, Audrey, this is so obvious that I really think you need to do. Remember, our focus is on prosperity, it's on equity, it's on access, and all tied to business and specifically innovation.
Well, so I'll say this. One is we know that the talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So the first thing is being willing to look in spaces around innovation where traditionally we don't look. So are we engaging young people from very early ages with the possibilities of opportunities to really, and catching people there, acknowledging that talent is actually distributed everywhere.
Right.
Number two, lifting up unique voices, lifting up the voices who have been talking about these things and having them in, not just in the room, but actually a part of the conversation to advance things. It's really, how do you bring people in the room who think differently than you? And everyone on this call knows that that's a really big part of innovation, right? To bring different voices in the room, to bring different thoughts in the room. Well, we have to apply that same idea to how do we solve the challenges of opportunity, solve the challenges of prosperity? How do you bring people in the room who are, by having different experiences, allow people to see new opportunities where they may not be?
And that's across all ages, right? That's across all.
That's of all ages, all backgrounds, all those kind of things. We have to lift up those voices and have folks in the room and have it be a part of decision making. And I think that's really, really important, that not only is it a voice that's sitting on the rostrum, but it's a voice of people who are making decisions, lifting those voices up and supporting those programs and scaling the programs of, okay, how do you engage with young people? How do you deal with, I saw something mentioned about the two generation challenge of digital inequity, right? And really looking at, again, we have generations of young people, all are being exposed to technology, but most are being exposed to it as users and not necessarily as creators, right? And so how do you move to doing that? And again, and spending time and dedication and resources in communities to say that, okay, what can happen if we do a deep investment, a deep dive into this ecosystem where the neighborhood sees themselves as where innovation is important. Innovation of all kinds, right? If we're really thinking about that, fostering innovation of all kinds, and some of that innovation will find itself in the tech space. Some of that innovation will find itself in an investment space, right? I think that's just the kind of purposeful engagement. I think we often spread the ideas too thin. So we're like, okay, everybody gets this, but no, sometimes you need to dig deep in a place again and how you spend 10 years where there are certain schools that you know are good in sports, right? There's certain schools anywhere, they're good in track and field, they're good in tennis, they're good in lacrosse. Right. How do you create situations where you know that this school or this neighborhood is producing innovators, right? And so people want to be in this space because they are part of this kind of cycle. They're part of this technology cycle. And then, so one, knowing that the opportunity and the talent is everywhere and lifting up those voices, and then providing scalable systemic leadership, right? Making this, how do we keep having this conversation when the next thing happens? How often are leaders getting together to see this as an opportunity, and it's actually the thing that they can do to make Pittsburgh, for example, different than Cincinnati? That if Pittsburgh is investing in this and making Western Pennsylvania the place where native-born talent is able to flourish, as well as people eventually will come from other places to flourish, that is a competitive advantage that this city will have. And I think that often we don't look at it like the investment in these things will get a return on investment, and the return on investment is being seen as a place where all can flourish. And the cities where people can flourish are the cities that tend to do better anyway. So you often hear in Pittsburgh the conversation around how do you lose talent to Atlanta, African-American talent particularly, right? And you hear that because there's been investments in those things flourishing. There's been purposeful investments by, individual entrepreneurs who have made money, by Georgia Tech, by the cities, by, so those things are very purposeful that you have to do. And in those places, when people can prosper, those are more interesting places. So the cycle continues. So we've done it, I think, in a broad sense. Everyone looks at the work that the foundations have done, that the universities, that the cities have done, but have we really thought about that as it pertains to diverse populations, and how do we retain and inspire and maintain diverse populations?
So, John, thank you for that. You want to hear, can you go through some of the questions, Jonathan? Oh, he's on mute. Okay. So let's see. What can we do to ensure, this is from Michael Steiner. What can we do to ensure that all kids know that their future's open, that we truly believe in them, that they're talent, and we do not distinguish between and among them? I heard in Pittsburgh more than once, this is not the messaging. And this makes me sad, deeply sad.
Put our money where our thoughts are. Put our money and our resources and our assets where the ideas are. Meaning, people know that through their experiences. Often I talk about user experience, and everyone in tech understands the benefit of user experience, right? So imagine if a young person wakes up and they come outside and the streets in front of their houses are not, they have potholes, and then the stores are closed and don't serve and don't have the same food, right? And there's, cop cars whizzing by. All these things are really the intellectual user experience that people have of their neighborhoods and have of their places. And when people have that idea, they know that it's not equal. They instinctively know that the experiences they're having are different than the experiences other people are having. So often what this means is, how do you create those opportunities where young people those messages are reinforced from the very beginning? Mm-hmm. They're reinforced in their childhoods, they're reinforced in the opportunities that their parents have, they're reinforced in the things that they see. They see new things, they see access to technology that we're talking about, it was just a huge issue. They see people that are loving and caring. So I think the part of it is we just have to create healthier, stronger senses of place. I'm not just talking about neighborhoods, but a sense of place is actually a distinction here. Mm-hmm. Because when you have a healthy, strong sense of place, then you think that anything can occur, anything can happen, right? But when you don't have that, your vantage point is that anything can't happen. Amongst the African American community in Pittsburgh, there is a narrative, which is not untrue, that it's very difficult to be successful in this city. So when you have the narrative that it's difficult to be successful, then it becomes difficult to be successful, because in your mind, that's how you're engaging with everything. And then even well-intended activities can still look like it's difficult to be successful. So if someone looks and says, okay, where are the Black tech, leaders? And are they being given the opportunity to flourish? Are they being given the opportunity to talk? Are they being given the opportunity to be amongst young people of all races, to reinforce that tech is something that is not foreign to the African American community or to the African immigrant community? So these are just like it's not just signaling, it's actually real-time engagement. Like we're talking about engagement, like, what does that really mean, and what are you encountering? What is your user experience, right? And I think folks in tech have a unique ability to really think about user experience differently than the rest of us, right? Like, folks in government and the nonprofit world, we don't kind of get that level of stuff, but y'all get it. Like when I pick up my phone and I like the way it works, it's the user experience. When I, when I do something, the interfaces, like those are all real things. And so I think the tech community can be really powerful in advancing those ideas.
Well, my hat's off to you for embracing all those practices in your day-to-day world. I saw that evidence when we judged the Pittsburgh Civic Hackathon and the magic that happened in just 48 hours. Yeah. What was your takeaway from that hackathon? Just for everyone here, we did a civic hackathon with the intention of trying to cultivate companies' ideas that would hopefully be formed into companies that could solve our social problems or issues that are near and dear to us. And Majestic was a judge. You were a critical judge too. You didn't go easy on anyone.
No, because I think often social good in tech, it's often like, oh, they're trying to do a good thing. But if the interface isn't right, if the team isn't right, it isn't right, right? I don't want you know, if someone was investing money as a Series A investor, they would have different vantage points on that, right? So I see myself as a Series A investor in the public good. So I want to know, what are we really talking about? What's really about to happen here? Because if not, then the tech that we use for social good it could be perceived to be not on the same level.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that we're bringing our A game, our collective A game. But yeah, some phenomenal folks. You know, they've been able to move fast. You know, I don't know if they broke anything yet, but they've been able to move fast. And so already connecting with Domi and director Ricks and everything, the winners. So yeah, I thought it was a really good example of how you can do it and how folks can come together with an idea and respond to today's issue in a very fast way.
Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of more questions that we should have time for. Jonathan?
Yeah, actually, so a really great question from the folks at the Pittsburgh Promise. Their big concern is really, how can we get some of the urban youth get their foot in the door at some of the corporations and employers, you know, so their resumes can get to the top. But like, they're not part of those circles where a resume can be handed and get to the top of the stack. How can we build those relationships and try to improve on that?
So I think one of the ways is by partnering with Partner for Work on the Summer Youth Employment, the Learn and Earn program, and specifically the kind of college process of it for young people that are older, that are in college, that come back to Pittsburgh. I'm on the board as a representative of the mayor. And what Partner for Work has really done is made huge strides at trying to make sure that young people who are in college are getting opportunities at Pittsburgh area corporations to be able to kind of understand culture, to understand fit, like all these kind of things that are often talked about and sometimes challenged, but they can understand those things by understanding what's the dress code, who does what, how, those kind of things that often some people don't have access to. So I would say if the tech community is really interested in that, to really invest and work with Partner for Work. Earl Buford, who's executive director, has done an amazing job.
Great. Mm-hmm.
I know this year is a little tough just because we're dealing with very unique circumstances, but really scaling up the college component and that component will be really important to get young people those experiences.
Is there another question, Jonathan, that we can? I have a comment that I think Majestics should address. And before we recorded this, he was telling us about his sweatshirt. I think there's an awesome story behind it. So I'm a sucker for history. And this is some important history that people may not know. Can you tell us a bit more about what's on your sweatshirt?
Sure. I'll pull my hair back here. So on my shirt here, we have kind of a set of neighborhoods. So you see Greenwood, Haiti, Jackson Ward, 4th Avenue, and Sweet Auburn. So these are 5 examples of Black Wall Streets across the country that were present. And so Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Haiti is Durham, North Carolina, Jackson Ward is Richmond, Virginia, 4th Avenue is Birmingham, Alabama, and Sweet Auburn is Atlanta. And I think it's important for those kind of things because we can forget that there were flourishing economies in the Black community that were internal, but also external. There were ones that had flourishing internal communities, but they also engaged with the larger society as well. And I think that once you know that and know that that is a possibility, then your eyes or the possibilities open up for what we can achieve again, right? We can achieve internal economies that are flourishing that also engage with other economies. Again, to my point, you can create spaces where a neighborhood is known for innovation, or a city or part of town is known for innovation, in the same way that we look at Silicon Valley. When I think about Silicon Valley or Silicon Alley, these are places that were deep levels of federal investment, right? Over years, over decades, were done to foster the innovation and the creativity and attract the folks who you would need there, right? And so, again, if we think purposefully like that, and we know when we spend resources intelligently, we can foster those same kind of things. If I use the example, if people say, well, why does this city produce all these soccer players? Or why does this place produce track runners? Or why does this place produce artists? It's something in the environment. So what are we doing to foster these kind of things in environments where it is not currently, right? And so that is also kind of an important thing that I get from just the history of the Black Wall Streets. And also to know that there were more than one. You hear a lot about Greenwood and Tulsa, and that also ends up with the Greenwood race riot, which really was government complicity in murdering thousands of people and burning down an entire part of a city. And sometimes that's a tough part of our conversation in America, because within the last 100 years, government was complicit in destroying an entire part of town. That also destroyed an economy. So we, however you want to frame it, is looking at the trajectory of American society and knowing that we are better than things that have happened. And I think right now we're in a moment to challenge ourselves to say, are we better than the things that have happened? No one wants to be defined by their worst day, but are we better than the things that have been going on? And what does that look like? It's one thing to say you're going to be better. It's another thing to be clear about what that looks like. And that's why I'm saying I think the tech space can be really thoughtful with bringing the best of the ideas, the best of the energy, and the best of the innovation, economy, and thought to spaces that sometimes are staid. I'm honored to work for a mayor who I think is creative, who does not kind of do much of the norm. But we know that sometimes government can be pretty pedantic. We know that government can do its own fair level of navel gazing. So I think that the partnerships with tech and innovation can be really helpful for us.
So what are your final wrap-ups? What do you want to say to me? What do you want to say to the tech community? What do you hope for right now? What can we put into the GSD?
Yeah, let's get busy. I think really just let's get busy. Like, let's really be thoughtful around what will distinguish our city and our community to make it a place that, native born folks of all races, all backgrounds really see this as a springboard for prosperity. Let's make it a place where you don't feel like you have to move to Boston or Silicon Valley or Austin or Chicago, right? What are the things that we do to make Pittsburgh a place that, and not just you have to move those places, but people want to be here? And what are the actions that we can make together as a city, county, state officials? How do we really get everyone together on this to bridge this gap of equity and innovation, and make it so that we don't separate them? That when we're thinking about innovation, we're being equitable, and we're thinking about equity, innovation is wrapped into the very nature of how we do that.
I think with the shift that we've recently seen with the pandemic, and we see so many, particularly tech companies, that are able to work remotely and are getting comfortable with what it means to work remotely, that Pittsburgh as a sense of place to live, this is our opportunity even more.
I agree.
And I think also with work from home that we probably left some people behind, but there's a tremendous amount of access that people can have to the new world of work. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think we need people like you that are going to kick people like me up to the moon and hope that we, work together. You've been a great partner and an inspirational leader, and it's just the beginning. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. These have been very somber weeks. And I know that we're going to work hard to execute that. I can tell you at the Tech Council, we're going to do through the guidance of people like yourself and others that we know who know how to do this with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk. And personally, I think Pittsburgh has a can-do spirit that when we decide to do it, we will. So it's not about the ability; it's all about the will.
Okay, well, we care about you. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you, everyone. We'll be here tomorrow at the same time, trying to wrestle with important topics and make sure that people have access and create an inclusiveness, but also paired with that, some actions. We want to be held accountable. So thank you, Majestic. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will follow up if there are some questions in the chat. It's easy to get a hold of Majestic. So, through the city website, I believe there's a link that you can reach him. He's very responsive. So I can't thank you all enough. Thanks, Majestic.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Be safe.